What is up, freaks? It's your boy Marty Bent here to introduce this week's episode of Tales from the Crypt. We sat down with Janine from the Block Digest podcast. She's an incredible privacy researcher and advocate for Bitcoin and privacy in general. If you guys haven't checked out Block Digest, go check out that podcast. They do an incredible job of diving into everything that's going on in Bitcoin, and they have a keen focus on privacy and OPSEC. This week's episode of Tales from the Crypt is brought to you by the Cash App. You freaks already know all about them. If you're in the U.S. or anywhere in the world where Cash App is available, you listen to this podcast, and if you have not downloaded it yet, what the hell are you waiting for? You got to do it. Use the code STACKINGSATS after you download it. That's STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $5, and $5 is going to go to Alves Lacrosse, charity very near and dear to our heart. And then on top of that, you're going to be able to take that $5 and stack sats with it. You can buy Bitcoin, sell Bitcoin, receive Bitcoin, send Bitcoin from the app. On top of that, they have their Boost program. You get a specialized debit card. It's accepted anywhere Visa is. You put your signature on it, and then they have Boost that you can enable. And once you enable them and you go shop at these merchant partners, you save some money. Actually, this week I noticed they opened up a $1 off MTA Boost for us New Yorkers. That was pretty cool to see. So take your subway fare from $2.75 to $1.75 using the MTA Boost if you're in New York City. Again, use the code STACKINGSATS to get $5. Send $5 to Alves. Go to your local app store. Download it today. This episode's also brought to you by Casa. Freaks, how confident are you in your key security? Our friends at Casa have drummed up one of the smartest and most secure ways to hodl your Bitcoin. No KYC, no altcoins, no percentage fees on your Bitcoin. No one standing between you and your keys. They've got an incredible team there, including Jameson Lopp. Jeremy Welch is the founder. And if you guys use the promo code TFTC, you're going to get up to $250 off your Casa membership. Or you can also hit their team up directly. Membership at team.casa. Again, if you want to email them directly, that's membership at team.casa. They'll give you a free demo, and you can even put them to the test with your hardest OPSEC questions. So they have multiple packages. All memberships come with a full set of hardware wallets for your multi-sig, plus the Casa node, which you can plug and play. And then they've also got Faraday bags, and other early access stuff that they're going to give you with this package deal. So for serious hodlers, Diamond and Platinum memberships net you 24/7 VIP service, a dedicated client advisor, and custom onboarding and OPSEC plan. And today, they just announced team key sharing. So if you're running a business and you have a team and you want to make it so you need a certain amount of people to sign off on moving Bitcoin, this is now available via Casa's product suite. So again, use the code TFTC to get up to $250 off, and then go to keys.casa to check out their website. I hope you guys enjoy this episode with Janine. Again, she's incredibly smart, and I don't want to say she's an incredible adversarial thinker. You're going to learn how to use maps outside of Google Maps and how to basically survive in the digital age without interacting with any of these big tech companies. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know I certainly did. Okay.
Tales from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here, sitting next to Matt Odell, and we're looking at a computer screen as we have one of the very few remote guests that we have on Tales from the Crypt. I'd like to introduce you freaks to privacy researcher, co-host of the Block Digest podcast, and overall interesting Bitcoiner, Janine. Janine, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, guten Tag.
Guten Tag. How's traveling Siberia treating you right now?
Well, the Zoom part of Siberia is, not my favorite place, but I definitely enjoy going on other people's podcasts. I've only done it. This is my second time now, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, this is why we brought you on to help point out where where we're going wrong in our privacy journey, particularly in Bitcoin. But Zoom, as we all know, they had that terrible. They were rooted basically and able to spy on everybody. It's apparently been patched, but that is the software that we're using to record this episode right now. Thank you for infecting your computer with the software to join this podcast. Sorry, I had to subject you to it.
Yeah, well, luckily I can nuke my browser after this.
Yeah, so before we get into like the nitty gritty of like Block Digest and what you guys are doing there, is the way we usually start out this podcast to get to know you a little bit more is like, how did you become a privacy researcher, number one, and then what about Bitcoin piqued your interest in particular?
So I wasn't a privacy researcher initially. I actually did work primarily as a transcriptionist and a researcher in general, like whatever I was basically told to research up until 2015. And then I decided, I've wanted to become a journalist for a while, but I kind of oscillated between that and becoming a park ranger, which is a whole nother story.
That's pretty
but
cool.
I've never so far worked for any media organization because let's say the style and the editorial policies of most traditional news media don't really fit with what I do. So then I started researching Bitcoin in late 2014. I had actually first heard about it through the Cypherpunks book that was published in 2012, but I didn't really have a strong interest in money at the time, so I kind of glazed over it when I first read it, and then I read it again. I was like, that's a lot more interesting, because I've been interested in whistleblowing for a really long time, and then I realized how important it is to have censorship-resistant money if you're doing journalism, and especially if you're doing any kind of whistleblowing on a corporation or a state.
So what about these topics in particular, like draws you to them, the privacy and helping whistleblowers and basically uncovering state malpractice, if you will, in corporate?
I actually don't really know, because to be honest, I grew up in the middle of nowhere and I didn't actually have anyone around me who influenced me in that direction. I didn't grow up in a particularly computer science focused group of people. I think it's kind of just a product, really, my interest was kind of a product of the time where I became attached to this field because when I was hearing about especially stuff with WikiLeaks and all of that, that was just something that I felt really passionate about, and I felt like these were passionate people who were trying to right wrongs in the world, and so it inspired me, and then I wanted to kind of follow along in that same field and hope that I could live up to it and maybe do better at some point in the future.
You know, Bitcoin seems like a very fitting topic for this interest. Since you've sort of been exposed to Bitcoin and been learning more about it and reporting more on it or doing more research into it, has your worldview sort of changed at all?
I think so, because like I said, I didn't really understand the importance of money, or rather my only view of the importance of money was that, people care too much about it, we should get rid of it, bankers are bad, blah, blah, blah. And I was severely distrustful of banks even before I got involved in Bitcoin, because the first time that I opened a bank account when I was old enough, I told the bank, like, I'm not giving you more than $200 because I don't trust you to hold my money. I was like, my money is right here. I don't know why I need to give it to you. And my suspicion was proven completely right, because I don't remember exactly when, but I used a debit card, the new debit card, either the day of or a couple days later after I just got it, and it didn't work. And I was like, what the hell? So I go back to the bank and they're like, oh, it's okay. It's just because it's a new card. That happens sometimes. It's like, but that how do you stop it from being a new card if you can't use it? So yeah, that just kind of cemented my view where I didn't trust banks, because I think a lot of us, I remember times where, they're just, especially with all the financial crises, there was just times where, there wasn't I distinctly remember a time when there just wasn't food, like there wasn't money to buy food, and so we had to basically do with what was ever, left in the pantry. And I hated the idea growing up that, I would have to live my life subject to, someone else basically taking my money away. And so I think a lot of the early, desire to go into something like Bitcoin was there, but I didn't realize it until a few years ago.
Damn. No, an innate visceral distrust of banks. It's something I get behind. No, it's something similar feelings towards banks as well, but it feels like we're just forced to work within that system. Bitcoin presents this new opportunity to create a system parallel to this, but is there anything in the way the Bitcoin industry has sort of built itself up in the first decade that worries you, that we're sort of replicating the system we're trying to run away from? Or do you think Bitcoin's assurances as a network are such that it is somewhat impossible to replicate that?
I definitely think that in terms of onboarding people who don't understand the values of the system and they're just getting in because they think they can get rich off of it, like in a way, the easy user interfaces were kind of a curse, because that meant a bunch of people could come into the system, and sure, the price went up, and that's great for, everyone, including the people who actually care about the values, but that exposed a large portion of the economy to the types, like bank-like institutions that I was trying to get away from, which, we can talk about one of those going forward, which is Coinbase, because that has a lot to do with the research that I've done regarding privacy in Bitcoin. So
yeah, let's jump into it. What are your thoughts on Coinbase? Are they a good custodian? Would you recommend using them? And if somebody has had to use Coinbase in the past and they need to rid themselves of the stink that comes with the UTXOs from Coinbase, how would they go about that?
So, I know a lot of people who have... I don't know a lot of people anymore who still use Coinbase. I know a few, but I know a lot of people who at one point or another have used Coinbase. I have personally never used Coinbase. I've actually never used any exchange, like KYC'd exchange. All of the exchanges I've done have been person to person or over some decentralized exchange or something like that. And so, yeah, the idea of using Coinbase is kind of like it's against everything that I stand for. A reason in particular, if you saw with the whole Delete Coinbase campaign that happened earlier this year, was that a few people, including me, were raising awareness about the fact that in February, Coinbase had acquired a blockchain surveillance company called Neutrino, which, by the way, the reason I say blockchain surveillance and not blockchain analytics has to do with, like, I feel like there's an important difference between surveillance and analytics, even though in a lot of ways they're similar, and I think it has to do with intent, consent, and transparency, which is those were the three things that I pointed out when I did a presentation about this recently. And so as far as what was public, Neutrino was staffed entirely by former upper management and engineers from a company called Hacking Team, which was an Italian offensive hacking firm that had taken advantage of various lax human rights and privacy laws in various countries, especially authoritarian countries, the United States, Europe, like a lot of countries. And they basically spied on and compromised a whole bunch of people, including journalists and activists who are often the primary targets of, such activity, including citizen journalists in Morocco, one of which I actually spoke to during this campaign, and also a human rights advocate in the United Arab Emirates who is actually still serving a 10-year prison sentence as a result of being targeted with their software. And so, so they weren't directly involved in Neutrino, but the kill team that brutally murdered Jamal Khashoggi last year was actually led by a man who was trained by Hacking Team several years prior, probably because they wanted to use their strategies, if not their tools, to surveil him up until his death. And this was actually Hacking Team wasn't mentioned specifically, but this man was confirmed in a UN investigation, and there's public records through leaked emails that he was involved with Hacking Team. So yeah, that's basically a whole bunch of things that, like, red flags, that I find that unacceptable, and I could never use a business like that personally or get involved with a business like that who has those kinds of connections. I actually talked more about this in an episode of Bottom Shelf Bitcoin. I think it was episode 43. So if you want to hear more about that, that's there.
They tried to brush it off too and say that it was like a negligence in their due diligence process or something like that.
Yeah, they did, which, well, initially they said, no, we were aware of it. Like, their initial response a few days after everything blew up was that they were aware of it, but they made a decision, based on the calculation that they needed to have some kind of blockchain analytics company, and they were dealing with regulations. It was all this PR stuff to, like, not talk about the legitimate concerns that people had. And then later on, Brian Armstrong, in a personal statement, claimed that this was a gap in their due diligence, which makes no sense because, I mean, one, if they didn't know that these guys came from Hacking Team, they are full of shit, because you can literally Google, or not Google, but DuckDuckGo, any of their names, and they will come up as being from Hacking Team. So, like, you didn't even do the due diligence of, an internet search. That's pretty bad, whatever your process is. But, and then if they did know, that just means that they made some kind of calculation that, the values of user privacy, or even just, not hiring people who have, I don't know, gotten journalists and human rights advocates imprisoned for, potentially several years.
Or cut up into pieces. That just seems like
something that's just something I wouldn't want to be involved with. And it's also, it's a public image issue, because obviously, like, people like me found out about it and we made a stink about it. And I don't feel bad about it whatsoever.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, they even had the nerve to say it was like a pro-privacy move. They were like, "Oh, we don't want to outsource our chain analytics." Yeah.
Which, it's like, come on, guys. That's it's like if they're going to outsource your data, basically that's what's going to happen. If I don't see any reason why you would trust these people. And actually, I guess they moved into a London office that's owned by Coinbase. I don't know if that still ended up holding, because Brian Armstrong then claimed that he would transition the Hacking Team people out of the company. Who knows whether that actually happened or not, because they don't actually believe in transparency.
And we never got a follow-up on that, right? They never said anything again.
So they could have just created a shell company and they could be working for that company, something like that.
Delete Coinbase.
Yeah, that's like, it's funny because they're not the only group of people from Hacking Team to do that. The CEO, I don't remember the name of the company. I think it was like Gray something, but he moved into, I can't remember the details, but I remember the CEO did something similar where he was acquired with Hacking Team, or Hacking Team staff or resources or whatever were acquired by a different company that basically does the same stuff. So they're all kind of just trying to snake their way out of their own public relations crisis, because all of the information that came out about them years ago basically destroyed their business, and they've been trying to slowly move away from that. But I think, these people haven't shown any remorse. And if someone doesn't show remorse, I believe that they should still feel the consequences if, it's not imposed on them.
Yeah. I didn't want this to turn into a Coinbase bashing podcast, but it seems like it's going to do that. Like, not only did they not have any remorse, but one, they don't have any remorse. Two, like, I don't even think Brian Armstrong particularly gets what Bitcoin is for. He openly admitted that he's trying to create the best payments network in the world, which is not really what Bitcoin is trying to do. And then three, there's so many fuck ups that one of these stalwart companies of the industry, quote unquote stalwart companies of the industry, can have over its existence before people have to walk away with their dollars. So they had like the ninja launch of Bcash. Took them a year and a half to get access to Ethereum Classic to Ethereum holders, and it's just, I think the delete Coinbase movement was the last straw on the camel's back of terrible decisions throughout Coinbase's career.
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of transition kind of statement is, the one thing I can say is that even if I wanted to use Coinbase, I actually can't right now, because Coinbase only, and this is the problem with a lot of KYC exchanges, is that because they only accept certain kinds of identification, that means that you can actually be a, quote, documented person and still not be able to use them, because, for example, I only have a passport as an ID, and Coinbase doesn't accept passports as a form of identification. So I literally can't use Coinbase unless I were to go out and get some kind of state driver's license for a state that I don't even live in, or something like that. That's insane to me. That's actually harder to open a Coinbase account than to get a bank account. So their whole marketing thing about, we're trying to create an open financial system, it's like, you've already failed, because you're harder to open than a bank account.
Yeah, it is funny. They are for some reason, they are still the go-to exchange for new entrants, which, like, I was at a conference a couple weeks ago and some dude walked up to me with the Coinbase app open on his phone. He's like, which Bitcoin do I buy? And I was like, delete Coinbase and download the Cash app. You can buy there.
Yeah, the real question is, if you had, like, which coin would you actually be able to use effectively in the economy if you had it?
Yeah.
But of course, that's a more complicated question that they can't answer. So yeah, that's the drawback of having good user interfaces for services that don't actually reflect the values that we want to see in the system.
Yeah. So I guess this is a good segue. And so I have a ton of questions on my mind right now. I think where we could start, because you were talking about surveillance versus analytics. So like surveillance, like a chain analysis, I think I'm comfortable saying you would argue is surveillance, but something like Lorentz, oxt.me is probably more analytics, Coinmetrics probably more analytics. With the stuff open, like what are you looking for in a quote unquote analytics service that's doing it ethically, quote unquote, and how do we get delete Coinbase like social movements going when we do find the provider is maybe acting unethically? And then from a buying Bitcoin perspective, you said that you've never bought on a KYC exchange, which I think is fascinating, but if we're being honest, most people do buy via KYC. And in your opinion, if they are forced to buy via KYC exchange, which should they use, if any, and how can we make it easier to get Bitcoin without KYC exchanges? I know that was a loaded question. Loaded question. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. It's okay. So to clarify, and this was, if anyone wants to see more about this, I did a talk called Bitcoin Privacy on and off chain at the Blockchain Training Conference in Denver. And I have slides available for everything on my website. But the point that I made during that presentation about analysis versus surveillance is that I have these three differences, which are intent, consent, and transparency. And I say that, a very simple definition of blockchain analysis is that it's the process of inspecting, identifying, clustering, modeling, and visually representing data on the blockchain. So if you're doing any kind of analysis, you're doing one or more of those things. And so for us to call, what are considered blockchain analysis companies, I mean, there's a wide variety of them, and they do different things, and they have different intents. And so that's why I have intent as being one of the key differences, because with blockchain surveillance, which I separate, is that there's this intent to perform the analysis for the purpose of de-anonymization for either intelligence or law enforcement purposes, or maybe, debatable whether you could classify, dirty tactics to, one-up your competitors, if that's surveillance or analysis. But basically, I draw the line definitely at law enforcement, where there's some kind of intelligence or law enforcement purpose. And of course, because this data is, it's on the blockchain is available to anyone who's part of the network. or even not, if it's an old copy, there's no warrant required, obviously. So you're parsing this data that, you're not having to go out and get consent from the user who made the transaction or anything, which I don't know if you necessarily should, but the point is that, it's surveillance, it's warrantless surveillance, whether that's justified or not. And also it involves aggregating personally identifying information that was also often not provided either with consent or with informed consent. And the difference is that most users don't know the consequences of providing this personally identifying information to these various third parties, so they can't make a good decision about whether that risk is worth it when they're buying, shitcoin 420 that is supposed to go to the moon. And also, a lot of the time, blockchain surveillance software is not transparent. The results are not transparent anywhere. They're not published. And the code itself is often not publicly available, except in rare circumstances where they may offer demo software. But that's the key difference. Like things like OXT, that is all open source code. It's available to anyone. And it comes with the explicit purpose of helping everyone be more aware of the privacy consequences of how they're transacting.
Yeah, we're lucky to have actors like Laurent in this space, and and what you guys are doing at Block Digest to help highlight this stuff. You see.
Do you think we are kind of at blame that it's even possible in the first place?
Is it possible is Bitcoin to blame for it being possible to do analysis?
Yeah, should we, I hate chain analysis companies as much as the next person, but isn't the solution that it shouldn't be possible for them to do it in the first place?
I mean, that's kind of I think the question is more, could we have done any better with the tools that were available to us at the time? And even if we could have done better, would those consequences have been worth it? For example, there's, obviously there's so-called privacy-focused blockchains like Zcash and Monero. Zcash debatable because it's basically Bitcoin with a small number of their user base using shielded transactions, which that's debatable about whether that even has a sufficient anonymity set to do anything. Monero, I mean, that's from my perspective, that's really the only one that can really call itself a privacy coin. But obviously that choice to hide everything, to shield everything, that still comes with consequences in terms of decentralization and things like that. So there's always going to be consequences, but whether Bitcoin can make the right series of upgrades that still keeps that balance. But I mean, I definitely think we should get more privacy improvements in Bitcoin. I just don't know what the right balance is in terms of still keeping the system decentralized and open.
Do you think if we get something like Schnorr enabled and we're able to do P2EP transactions more easily, or just CoinJoins more easily, that'll be a sufficient amount, or definitely a step towards the ideal, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, because especially one of the things I mentioned is, because I don't know if you guys know this, but chain analysis, it's kind of weird to say their name because you want to say chain analysis, but chain analysis actually holds webinars regularly. And it's kind of funny because Nopara, he was the lead developer. I think he since stepped down as CTO and now he has a research role. But at the time, lead developer of Wasabi, which does CoinJoins, he actually makes a point of attending those webinars and reporting back on Block Digest about what they said. And so it's basically, and sometimes they talk about like Wasabi and CoinJoins and what can they do about it, or are they effective? So it's quite funny because he's learning about his, quote, enemy in their own territory, and they're obviously not learning very much about him in that way because, I mean, whatever Nopara does doesn't have any effect on whether CoinJoins work. But one of the things that they said that I remember is someone asked them during the Q&A, can you track Bitcoin going into and out of CoinJoins? And the researcher from Chain Analysis said that they could track Bitcoin generally going into CoinJoins, but not going out. So already with CoinJoins, we have a pretty, like, not perfect, but a rather effective tool for really screwing up their, ability to perform analysis in any effective way. So it's going to just get even worse. It's always an arms race, but I predict that it's going to get worse on their end in terms of what they're able to actually understand about what's going on the blockchain. If, these updates come out as predicted and they all work and there's no issues and they enable more updates that improve privacy. So at the moment, I'm pretty optimistic about what we're able to do. Whether people will adopt those updates is obviously, that's a whole other question. What section of the economy will actually be capable of knowing how to use these tools and whether they'll even be usable enough for most people to take advantage of them.
Yeah, I guess that's that's my biggest worry for Bitcoin is just apathy at the end of the day. So you're again going back to the KYC exchange versus getting Bitcoin on a P2P market. Do you think it's more of a UX hurdle or an education hurdle? So obviously it's easy to go to the Cash App and just buy Bitcoin there. Obviously you got a KYC, BISC, or HODL. It's another story. It's a little bit more involved. Meeting people in person, wiring strangers money and stuff like that. Do you think it's a UX problem, or do we just have to educate people on why they should want to acquire Bitcoin in that fashion?
I definitely think it's more heavy on the education because you can make a really nice user interface, but if users don't understand why they need to use a particular tool, they're just going to still keep using the easy route. And even if it's super easy to implement, one of these privacy features, they still may not use it because they don't understand what advantage it gives them or, why not using it is a problem. So I think it's also it's very heavily on the need that we need to communicate the value of why this is necessary, even if it's not personally necessary for any one individual. Like they don't live in a country where they feel like, their money is going to be taken from them or they're going to be, surveilled and imprisoned as a result of whatever they're doing. They should still use those features because the more people that are using them, the greater the benefit there is to everyone, especially the people who actually need them.
Yeah. It's that's one thing we try to do here. I mean, full disclosure, we're sponsored by KYC Exchange and KYC loan provider here, and that's somebody who's trying to educate people about Bitcoin. It is a weird because obviously as humans they usually go the easier route, and it is hard to help people develop new practices and new tendencies. So that as somebody who's attempting to educate, it's always something I'm interested to hear other people's perspectives on. Because do you think there is a right way though to buy KYC and then cover your tracks? And do you think that is maybe a good course of direction to get into Bitcoin? Is maybe you buy on a KYC exchange, you learn more about Bitcoin, you come to understand the value prop of actually holding your keys and then move it off. Do you see that being a flow into self-sovereignty, or do you think that's a bad course to take?
In terms of self-sovereignty, as long as you reach that point, I guess you've succeeded. In terms of privacy, it's a bit more difficult because sometimes there's circumstances where once you've made that disclosure, once you've made that leak, you're essentially leaking sensitive information to someone and then, crossing your fingers to make sure that they don't do the same in a way that you don't know or expect. That some of those mistakes can't be recovered from. And certain people, they have the money and the resources that they can fix that problem in various ways by, changing their identity, moving to some other place. They can do various things to make up for that, but the average person can't. So it all depends on whether you think that risk, I mean, like some of these services, they'll go down and everyone will forget about them, and maybe there will never be any problem because they don't even back up any of the data for that service, and so it just kind of disappears somewhere into into a landfill like Bitcoin keys often do. But in other cases that can stick around for years, and if the service becomes really popular and really big, they'll just keep it, and the privacy policies that no one reads say that they can keep it, and so you never know where your data is going to flow once you've let it out. So it just depends on the risk that you're willing to take, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main issues with Bitcoin privacy is that the blockchain is forever, and a lot of our errors are going to be forever. So not only is it important to advocate good practices, being privacy conscious. Like here at TFTC, we've been pushing CoinJoins very strong because we need more liquidity and we need more people to realize why it's important. But all they have to do is make one mistake, and it just all gets, for the most part, gets exposed, and they might not even realize there's so much nuance there that it's going to take a lot of education.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good segue into what are the most common mistakes you think people make, like outside of the blockchain, actually, like whether it be searching block explorers or sending addresses via email that Bitcoiners commonly make that they could easily avoid.
Yeah, so I would, we can go into like off blockchain mistakes and then maybe some OPSEC things, which are kind of related, but they're not always common mistakes. But the number one thing that I think people do on chain that damages their privacy, which Satoshi warned about in the privacy section of the Bitcoin white paper, is that they reuse addresses, and that just makes it really easy to cluster coins together. So that's like an on-chain mistake. And then using KYC services is another thing. I do like there maybe a few years, like that's why I'm not surprised that a bunch of people that I know have used Coinbase at one point or another, because several years ago it was like Mt. Gox, Coinbase, and not very much else, and that was the only option. But these days, like in the past year or two, there are so many options available, like not all equally usable or available to everyone, but there are a number of options, and I think it's entirely possible to do what I did and not use custodial KYC services. And I actually have I have a term called KYC Lite, which is that there's some services which ask for your name or phone number or something like that, but they're all easily spoofable pieces of data. So you can fake the data and put whatever you want in there, and they don't really care because they don't verify it. So that's another thing. It's like just try to find as many services as possible in each area, like merchant services, exchanges, things like that. Just I think most of it is just people aren't aware of what's out there, and so that's why I included a lot of examples in my presentation that I did last month, because I think just some people aren't aware of what's out there. Another common thing that people do that damages their privacy is that they think that as long as they do things right in terms of Bitcoin, like the wallet that they choose to use, and things like that, or how they transact, that they think that that's kind of all they have to do. But I think there's a number of like basic browser hygiene type things that people also need to do outside of what they do with Bitcoin that can still damage their privacy in Bitcoin. For example, you may, even if you never use a KYC wallet or exchange, you can still end up, loading up Google Chrome without a VPN or Tor and type in the name of a blockchain explorer, and then you enter one or several of your addresses into that explorer to check your balance, and you've basically now not only told that block explorer what your approximate location is based on, your IP address, and also if they're using any kind of browser fingerprinting, which Coinbase does, a lot of services do. They know a lot of things about the kind of device you're using as well. And you've also now correlated all of those addresses to that IP address, and so they can reasonably assume that you could control all those addresses and they belong to you. So you could do everything right in terms of the wallet and the blockchain, but then there's other behaviors that could compromise you outside of that. And I can go into like OPSEC things that are related to that I think can also be compromising.
Yeah, let's jump into it.
So one of the biggest things for me, and this surprises many people, but I don't use smartphones, and I think people should avoid using smartphones as much as possible if they can. Just because, I don't know if you've seen it, but Edward Snowden actually tweeted recently a whole thread about like all of the things you have to do to make your smartphone reasonably secure and private to use. And even at the end of that, he said, like, even after you've done all this, you would just be better off not using a phone. So I think, as much as you can, avoid using smartphones just because they're not good in terms of privacy. But if you have to, you should use them as little as possible. You should, buy SIM cards with cash. Don't link the phone to accounts with your real name. Don't use biometric authentication at all. So I had to use a smartphone for a brief period of time for work, but what I did is I ended up weaning everyone that I was working with off of any applications that required a phone, and so then I eventually didn't have to use a phone. For example, chat apps like Signal and Telegram all require phone numbers, and you've probably seen it, but there's a big problem with cryptocurrency people getting SIM swapped, and that's basically because telecom companies are absolutely shit at security. I mean, they're shit at security, but I think it was Nick Szabo who pointed out that, we shouldn't necessarily blame them for that because they weren't designed for the purposes that they're being used for now. But I don't know. I'm not going to give them that much credit. So yeah, smartphones, big vulnerability, try not to use them. Also, I mean, you've probably noticed, but big one for me is try not to share pictures of yourself online if you can avoid it, especially ones that reveal your location. For many people in Bitcoin, it's kind of too late for this part of the advice because all of you are probably going to need a face change surgery in a few years to fix this. And I don't think... I think it's still possible that you can attend, like some people think that if you have this rule, you can't attend meetups and conferences, but all you really need to do is develop an awareness of cameras in the area, and you also need to start advocating for consensual photography policies in these spaces, which shouldn't be that hard because I think there are a lot of people who are photosensitive and they would not push back against that policy, especially the Chaos Communication Congress, which is like one of the most popular hacker conferences. They've had a no photo no video policy without asking first for as long as I can remember, and so it's not even a new thing. And I was actually able to be a speaker at the conference I went to in Denver without being photographed or video recorded, while also wearing a mask and a wig as a backup. So it's I think it's entirely doable that we just when we're taking a selfie or a crowd shot, we just think maybe there's someone in the audience who doesn't want their face on the internet, and I think I've done a pretty good job so far because no one knows that I look like unless they've met me. So I do get recognized for my voice, though. That's a problem, and apparently you can generate reasonably accurate renderings of people's faces based on their voice. So
what?
I think
I didn't know that.
You can.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I'm not looking forward to getting voice change surgery.
How's that even
But,
possible? Can they just like
I
do sonar to read the vibrations that would come off your voice or something? What?
Yeah, I think it's something like because voices they're relatively unique. It's something about, I don't know. I don't know exactly the details of how they do it, but I guess voices are somewhat unique enough and rather specific in terms of ethnicity and things like that, or at least they give a lot of clues about that they can paint a reasonable picture of what you look like. I don't know how accurate it is, but yeah, that's a thing that apparently we have to worry about as well.
It's pretty crazy. Actually, probably surprisingly to a lot of you freaks out there, the Bitcoin community here in New York is actually pretty good with that no picture policy. I think we just ran an event, a cold card event last night here, and Matt here ran it, and no picture policy was.
It blows
Yeah.
my mind that's not more common in this space. It's ridiculous. We have to push for that more.
Yeah, and another big one is, I'm constantly surprised by how many Bitcoiners will just, the Lambos are one thing, that's like extreme example, but I'm surprised by the number of Bitcoiners who are just walking freely around with all kinds of crypto memorabilia on them, especially ones that like have the Bitcoin symbol or say Bitcoin, because personally when I'm out in normie society, I don't display Bitcoin stuff because, one, I don't want to be followed home by some creepy dude or gal who thinks that I'm crypto rich and thinks they can get money off me. But I also don't want to be questioned at airports, and I don't even really want to show up on city surveillance footage as being someone who's interested in Bitcoin, and here's where I'm going all the time. So I just don't want to make it easy for people. So when I'm going to conferences or meetups, I either cover up whatever memorabilia I may have, or I change at the venue and I don't wear it anywhere else. So that's a big thing for me as well.
That's one of the things we made sure of with our own merch. It doesn't say Bitcoin anywhere. It doesn't even say TFTC anywhere.
Yeah. Trying to keep it discreet. No, but it is.
Yeah.
Is this a depressing living we have to live in privacy? Are you optimistic about the future of privacy? Do you think we will build systems that are more inherently private and will make a lot of this easier? Will make privacy easier? Do you think this iteration of the internet, where we have huge corporations as data silos, will be something of the past at some point in the future?
I definitely don't think that like in the next few years we're going to be able to turn that wave around towards the complete opposite of what I want to see. But I definitely plan to be at the front line of people who are resisting those type of changes. Like, for example, there's been a number of times where I am told that I'm required to give a phone number, and I'm like, but I don't have one. And then they're like, oh, okay. Like, they just deal with it. And if it ever comes up where I have to give that and there's no other option, it's just like, I'm not using your service. So I'm going to be trying as hard as I can to avoid things that I know are leading in that type of direction. And that's not only with Bitcoin stuff, it's like social media in general. Like I'm probably not even up to my own standard with that, but I try to, as much as possible, use services in a way that, or at least if I'm compromising myself by using things like Twitter, I try to do it with the purpose that I'm putting out research and information for how people can improve their privacy, at least in terms of a balance that's more of a benefit than whatever cost I'm suffering.
Yeah, no, I really hope you do keep on putting that content out on Twitter. It is invaluable, and the work that you guys do at Block Digest is as well. But is it a hard life to live, trying to be as private as you are?
It can be difficult sometimes, but because Hello,
Janine? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
You still got me? Yeah.
I'm sorry, we broke up there. Yeah, the question I have is like, is it a hard life to live trying to be this private? Do you find that you have to put in a lot more effort to go about your daily life?
I mean, some of it is, I wouldn't say so. I mean, there are some things that are definitely more difficult. Like, I mean, I, for example, don't use like Google Maps to navigate. So
What?
when I'm traveling, yeah, I don't use Google. Like the only time I've used Google Maps is if I'm looking up the location of something and I just can't find it on any other mapping service, like especially the ones that I use that I feel better about using. So I don't use Google Maps to navigate. Obviously I can't because I don't use a smartphone when I'm walking around, so I can't use it for that. So I've just gotten in the habit of, if I'm going to go to a place, I literally, I take out a piece of paper and I make a map or I write down the directions, and it doesn't actually take that long. And it's just something I've gotten used to. And actually, there's been a number of occasions where people using Google Maps around me, they've gotten lost and they don't know where to go because the map is like updating and changing the route because you've now moved, or it doesn't get your GPS location, and so they get lost. And I'm like, I have my paper, we can go now. So I've just gotten used to it by this point, because I've become accustomed to not using certain things that, they may make life easier in the moment, but they come with a huge privacy cost that not everyone was aware of at the time, and may take a while for them to realize it. So I wouldn't say it's particularly difficult. It's actually relatively easy to live without a smartphone. And people are surprised by that because they think it's like something that's at the center of their life. But I found it relatively easy to do something like that in particular.
I can get down with
And it's also kind of fun.
Yeah, I was gonna
It's
say.
also kind of fun, like, when people don't know who I am, or they don't, like, there's a lot of people, they don't know what continent I'm on, most of the times. I just find that fun, because it's like, it's like a game. Like, you're trying to find me, and I'm trying to, come up with things to, confuse people. I can treat it like a game.
Where in the world is Janine? Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? I can get down with bringing back cartography as a thing.
Yeah.
What is your favorite Google Maps, Altern?
So it's mainly OpenStreetMaps because that's the one that's the most comprehensive, compared to Google Maps. And it also has the functionality of like estimating how long it takes to go a certain distance and things like that. It's not perfect, but it's the closest one that I found.
That's Open Maps?
OpenStreetMaps.
OpenStreetMaps, yes. Okay, cool. I'll have to check that out.
And it's a particularly cool project too because they have so much in terms of like the development community going on in terms of actually building the maps, and you can actually create local versions of OpenStreetMaps too, on your device, that you don't need to have internet or anything.
That's pretty sweet. So just bring the part of the map that you need for your day and go about it.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Sweet. So I guess we'll wrap up here. Let's talk about Block Digest a little bit. We got you, Shinobi, aka Brian Trolls, Crypto Rick, and Nopara. How did this motley crew get together? How did Block Digest start, and what is like your mission with the show? Because if you freaks out there have not listened to Block Digest yet, you're missing out. It's an incredible show on YouTube that Janine and the cast that I just listed off host weekly, correct? Once a week?
Yeah. It's changed up a lot because we've been doing it since August 2017, so we're past the 2-year mark, and when we initially started it, we were actually doing it daily, but the episodes were a lot shorter. And then we were switching to I think it was 3 times a week, 2 times a week, once, the schedules changed a lot just because we're all doing a bunch of things and our schedules change during the year, and so we're not strict on any schedule right now, but we're also branching out into different types of videos besides the main show. But for a little background on how it started, basically I used to be at another YouTube channel called World Crypto Network, but to a much more limited extent, many years ago. And basically, my partner and I, because he was also there, we had some content quality and money disagreements with the other hosts, and it became very clear that we weren't appreciated there. So we left in August 2017, and basically there was a few people who they were also interested in doing. They were interested in doing a show, but fixing the things that we were concerned about. And originally, I wasn't actually supposed to be a co-host on Block Digest. I was just a background person who was making the video descriptions and things like that, technical support. But I decided that maybe I should practice public speaking. And so in September, the next month, I decided to actually start speaking on the show. And going back to those episodes, I don't sound so great, but I definitely feel it's worth it in terms of building that skill if it ever becomes of any real use to me, and I think it has. So I think we're now on season 7, and we have almost 200 episodes, and we still have quite a small audience. I think we only have like 2,500 subscribers on the YouTube channel. We also have, I think we're using we're setting up an iTunes as well. But we're averaging, 500 viewers, somewhere around there per episode. But I feel like a lot of the right people and a lot of the people who share our values are watching, even if it's not a great number. So I care more about that than getting tons of views.
Yeah, I mean, your audience is highly engaged. And, I'm one of them. I love the show. So definitely
Cool.
keep up the
Thank
great
you.
work.
No, I do as well, and I think and it's some example like you guys when you went through the user activated soft fork. That's actually one thing we tried to, off the top of our head, go through that whole saga, like the New York agreement and sort of the timeline of how SegWit got adopted and how user activated soft fork unfolded, and we had to we couldn't even post it because our dates were all off, and you guys covering that was an incredible 45-minute video if you guys want to. It might have been longer than that, actually.
But that one was Shinobi only.
No, that was Shinobi only, yeah.
Yeah, that was...
That was Shy 256.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, originally when we started, we just had the normal Block Digest show, and the length of that has changed a lot. But we also, for the past almost 2 years or so, we also have a special edition series, which is where we interview people. And then Shinobi and I have recorded a shorter, more in development video series called ZK Snacks, which actually Nopara and his co-founders that were developing Wasabi took that name and used it for the company that was making Wasabi, so that was pretty cool. And Shinobi recently also has his own series, like you said, Shy 256. And I think it was last year or so, before Nopara was really a regular co-host, or around the time he joined, we also published a series called Cypherpunks 101 Privacy in Bitcoin, which is a series of interviews specifically. And that was made by Deja Jean, and that was interviewing people like Adam Gibson and Chris Belker, Julia Fanti, and Ethan Heilman, and people like that who are focusing on privacy upgrades to Bitcoin.
Yeah, if you freaks have not checked out Block Digest yet, go do it. Janine, thank you for joining us. We're about an hour in here. Before we wrap it up, I guess, do you have any parting notes, anything you want to hit on before we wrap up here? Any advice you want to give out, or topics that are on the top of your mind that you think we should... Oh, let's talk about... We did not even get to this. The Lightning Network talk that you want to give in Berlin.
So not completely solid yet, but a proposal that I made to a conference for a talk was because a lot of my research in journalism, that's the thing, is I do more writing about how to improve journalism than I've probably written as a journalist. And one of the models for journalism that I've been working on is called revision-controlled journalism, which it'll take me a bit to explain, but you can also find that on my website, and also it's pinned on my Twitter. But basically, I want to create more open source, censorship resistant journalism. And when I say open source, I mean both in terms of the software that is used for journalistic activity. I want it to be open source as much as possible, but I also want the sources that are used behind stories to be more easily verifiable and transparent in terms of how they're presented in stories, because I think that's really important. I mean, it's important for code as well. Like, you should be able to verify code for yourself, so why shouldn't you be able to verify the facts behind what composes a journalistic story? And it's kind of based on Julian Assange's idea of scientific journalism, which is that you should be able to test the assertions made in a piece like you should be able to test the assertions in a scientific study that, you know, publishes an experiment. So it's kind of based on that. And so the talk that I want to give is how applications of blockchain tech to journalism that I've seen over the past several years have really failed or have significant problems with them that I don't feel good about. But I have a really good feeling about what Lightning can do in terms of, you know, making it possible to do much easier micropayments for a reader base, but also in terms of censorship resistance and privacy in terms of funding sustainable journalism.
Are you telling me that Steemit isn't the end-all be-all of journalism on the blockchain?
Yeah. Well, it was quite funny because one of the projects that I'm planning to criticize is Civil Media, which was a consensus spoke for a while. I don't know if it still is. Oops, sorry. That is a doorbell ringing. 1 second.
It's all good.
One of the... Yeah, if you can edit that out, I don't know. But
we like
one of the
background
projects
noise.
I plan to... Okay. One of the projects I plan to criticize is Civil Media, which is it was or is a spoke of consensus in the Ethereum space, and their idea for building censorship resistant journalism using a blockchain was basically to put put everything on the Ethereum blockchain, like the text, even the formatting of the article. And I'm like, yeah, you're gonna have a bloating problem. And so when I mentioned, it wasn't someone at Civil, but it was one of their media partners, I mentioned some of these concerns to her, and I said, you know, you're basically doing what Steemit is doing. And she was like, she said something like, Steemit, no one knows what Steemit is. And it's like, yeah, do you know why? because they tried basically what you're doing, and it's not working out. So... yeah, that's what I hope I can. I mean, if I don't end up doing it at the upcoming conference, I plan to do it at some point because I think it's important to talk about, and it'll basically be what I'm currently working on.
Yeah, we can't have any more Dan Larimers or Joe Lubins running around profiting from these terrible journalistic endeavors on the blockchain.
I mean, I think with Civil, didn't they sell their pre-mined bags to like journalists?
Yeah, I think they were paying their journalists in the Civil. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
But it was yeah. They basically had. I mean, their first like attempt to do a crowdfund failed, not only because Consensus, funnily enough, had been the primary donor and I think controlled 90% or some absurd percentage of the tokens in the token sale. But then also there was a lot of disagreement between the Civil people and various, I think they were also paying various partner organizations about what format they would be paid in. And there was obviously a lot of them who said, you know, we need fiat. This token is not going to pay our bills. Like, we need to eat and pay rent. And so there was some kind of disagreement about that. But I mean, that to me, that was completely predictable, because an organization that didn't even take the time to consider the fundamental risks of the model they were building, like very obvious risk to me as a person who's not actually that technical. I'm not a developer. And I was able to see these red flags coming from a mile away. If an organization can't take the time to figure that out, then it doesn't surprise me when they have those kinds of management issues.
Yeah, it's crazy what kind of ideas people try to throw in a blockchain in 2016 through 18. Hopefully we've learned these lessons, though. I like to think people are learning their lessons. And that's something we try to do at TFTC is we built like a small prototype for microtransactions, because that's something I actually wrote about last week and I'm pretty passionate about as well, is like if I can easily just pay a Lightning invoice to read a content behind a paywall, I think that is a no-brainer. It would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think there actually is one that has existed for about a year, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but they built a Lightning application.
Y'alls, right?
Yeah, Y'alls, yes. Y'alls, that's what it is. Y'alls.org. I think it was y'alls.org or something.
A great troll. The greatest troll company name of all time. Trolling Yours by Ryan X. Charles.
Yeah.
Ex-Bitcoiner.
Yeah, and I think, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I don't think it's been adopted too much, but I think that was a good, like, test run of, it clearly works. It's just a matter of, you have to get enough people to adopt Lightning, and you have to get enough people who are also willing to pay for journalism, which is a bit of a problem for various reasons. But yeah, so a combination, I basically want to build or get someone to help me build a combination of Y'alls and Libra Patron, which is the Bitcoin alternative to Patreon, that I think is an application actually directly within the BTC Pay server suite, as far as I know.
Correct.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy what you can do with BTC Pay. I don't think we're using the Libra function, but we do have like people can donate via BTC Pay directly on our website.
Yeah.
No, but it feels like it's almost there.
I mean, on that note,
Yes.
I've been recently thinking that Lightning is the single biggest privacy improvement that we've seen recently. I mean, besides SegWit enabling it in the first place. Would you agree with that?
I think in terms of the effect that it's had and the fact that it's actually gotten pretty good adoption so far, I would say it definitely is. Whether it... I mean, it's a massive improvement. But I think there's also a lot of privacy features and tools that exist that they're either not aware of it or they don't know how to use it. Like Samurai Wallet has a lot of features implemented that, they've been around for a while, and they're pretty much the only wallet that has added it. So whether Lightning is the most effective tool out there, I mean, it probably is. I think it is. But I also think there's a lot of existing tools that people could use to improve their privacy that they're just not aware of because the wallets aren't adding them.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Samurai in particular, with the Dojo Nodl that's coming out, where people can just buy the device, link it with their phone, and then have all the tools just easily there at their fingertips. It might be that full stack that really helps push the needle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the last thing I would add is, because I mentioned BTC Pay server, and I think it would be really funny because that project, I believe, was basically inspired by BitPay, implementing some things that people were not happy about, and then Nicolas Dorier saying, I'll make you obsolete. And actually about a week ago, when Coinbase announced that they would be moving into the office, Coinbase, I said, no, CoinDesk, sorry. CoinDesk was moving into their parent company office, Digital Currency Group, and so I tweeted at them, I'll make you obsolete in terms of journalism. So that's, I'm now putting pressure on myself to actually carry that out. I don't know if it'll happen within a year like I think it did with BTC Pay server, but yeah.
That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself to follow up that Nicolas Dorier tweet.
Yeah, it is.
Janine, this has been a massive pleasure for me. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we learned a lot. Again, this is something, as two well, I'll speak for myself as an individual who's not as privacy conscious as I probably should be. These are very good conversations to have, and I really appreciate you sort of coming here and educating us about how dumb we are on the internet.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I should probably go on other podcasts more often.
You should. You're very smart, and you got a great point of view. I'm happy that the freaks are going to hear it. On that note, where can we find out more about you? Where can the freaks go find you?
Well, I'm one of those people that uses a variety of apps, some of which are not usable by the average person. But I have emails at ProtonMail and Tutanota. Those are my public emails. I also obviously have Twitter. That's like my only really public-facing profile outside of my website. So I would say non-sensitive stuff, Twitter. Sensitive stuff, email. If you don't want to use one of the OG encryption applications, you can use the normie one like Keybase. Don't take the Stellar. And that's basically it.
Yeah, well, don't take the Stellar. Maybe donate it to the Tor project, and they'll auto dump it for you.
Yeah, I guess.
That was that's what we told people. I haven't done it yet. I haven't touched my Stellar on Keybase yet. Matt has been dumping.
I
it.
donated mine to Tor, and Shinobi cut me deep on Twitter.
What did he say again?
Yeah.
He called me out. He's like subtweeted me, and then I liked the tweet, and then he called me out directly. He was like, "I see you liking this, man. I know what you did."
Yeah, that's Shinobi.
We need to get Shinobi on here too. I would love to talk to him.
Oh,
I
yeah,
would
and
love
obviously if you want to hear me, if you want to hear me shit talk once a week, that's Block Digest.
Yeah, we'll share all these links in the show notes. Janine, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday and the rest of your weekend. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Goodbye from Siberia.
Well, good luck on your journeys through Siberia. Peace and love, freaks.
Bye.